Hello, welcome. I am your budget buddy, and in this video we're finally going to bring together all the work we've done in creating a budget and tracking those expenses. We're going to bring all those things together in something we call simply the results. And the results is where all the magic happens. It's where we finally can take a look and see how are we spending based on what we thought we'd be spending. Where are we different? And that can lead to things like where are there opportunities to save or to change how we spend for the better. At a minimum, you're going to find out what's working well, what's not working well, and you'll have a better sense of where you stand financially than if you didn't go through this process to begin with. So we're going to dive right into the last tab of the Budget Buddy tool, and we're going to show you exactly how you can start to make actionable information to make your financial situation better. Let's take a look. All right, so here we are. In order to show the results tab in action, I'm going to go ahead and use that sample of the Budget Buddy tool that's already populated with a year's worth of data. And you can get a copy of this if you're interested on the Budget Buddy website. Again, that's at budbud.info. So what you see on the screen are 4 segments that are of charts and tables that are designed to give you just the information you need to dig into the results of your spending and to allow you to get some insight in terms of what's going on. So I'm going to go over each section one at a time, but just know this is what it looks like in its entirety. This is the whole thing. And this prints out nicely onto one piece of paper. So if you wanted to print it out and carry it with you to look at later, you can do that without having to be on your computer or on your mobile device. So let's go ahead and go through this one by one. And then I'm going to go through a couple scenarios to walk through how you would engage this to kind of understand your spending situation a little bit better. All right, so let's start with the first square. All right, so starting with the upper left chart, we see a bar graph. And when we did better than what we'd budgeted, we see a black bar, and those represent positive numbers. And when we did worse than we expected, we see a red bar, and those represent negative numbers. If we take our mouse pointer and we highlight over any of the bars, we can see the actual detail of how much we were in fact over or under. And in this case, we see for February, we were almost $8,600 better than planned, which is great. But in January, we were about $4,800 worse than planned, which might be a problem for us. So this is a quick overview, month to month, of how we did compared to plan when we were positive and when we were negative. So then we move to the next section, which is in the upper right corner, and we see here there's what's called a donut chart. For those that are using the alternate version of the tool, you'll see a pie chart, but both are telling you the same thing. What they're saying basically is what percent of your expenses fall into each category. And the larger the percent, the larger that color is represented on the chart. So in this particular case, immediately the first thing you notice is the biggest piece of expenditure is this blue piece of the chart. And we can see from the right, blue represents home. If I highlight or put my cursor above that blue section, you can see, again, what category it belongs to, how much money was spent in that category, and what percent. So in this case, over $34,000 was spent in this home category, and those are mortgage payments, and it represented 39% of all spending. If we want to look at, for example, miscellaneous expenses, which is this purple piece of the pie, or donut chart, that's almost $4,800 spent, and it represents 5% of all expenditures. So it gives you a sense proportionately of how much you're spending in each category. So next, we'll go to the lower left corner. And this is where you see both a table as well as a corresponding graph that lines up with that table. And it shows for whatever time period you have selected what the top, best, to worst variance is for that time period. So we're currently measuring for the entire year, and we can see that our best variance is the income. We were about $10,300 favorable than what we thought. And the worst variance is this category called big one-time things, where there are about 7,000, almost 7,700 unfavorable based on our plan. So it gives you a quick snapshot. So if you remember going back to the first chart, we saw that those red and black bars, this then breaks that down. Instead of by month, it breaks it down by category. Now, last but not least, in the lower right corner, you can delve down into the details within each category. So this basically allows you to select a category, and then it will give you the top 10 expenses for that time period that you've selected. And it ranks it from the biggest expense to the 10th biggest expense. And then if you put any descriptions in your log, those are also carried forward here. So you can quickly kind of delve down into a category where you might see a particular variance you want to know more about, and then you can see kind of what are the top expenses that made that variance what it is. And that's it. Those are the 4 tables and graphs that come together that allow you to explore how you're doing in terms of your finances. Now, one last note before we go into a couple scenarios to show how this works and how you can ask questions about your spending that can result in some insights that will hopefully allow you to make some changes for the better. Now, much like the budget and the log tabs, this tab also follows the same convention where when you see a green area, that's an area that you can make a change or a selection. And in this case, there are 2 areas. There's this box here to the left, and there's also this box in the lower right corner. Both of them, when you make a selection, changes what you see on the screen. So we'll start with the date as the first example. Right now, it's showing the entire year or year to date. But I can also pick on a particular month. So I can look just at March, for example. And then all the information in all 4 of the tables and charts reflect just that month. I can do the same for September, and all the graphs and tables adjust accordingly. If you scroll down, you can also do any month to date. So May to date, for example, I'll click on that. That includes all the information from the beginning of the year to the end of May. And again, all the tables and graphs adjust accordingly. In a similar fashion, in this lower right corner, I can select what accounts I want to look at by selecting on those accounts. So right now, I'm looking at everything. All accounts are represented. But let's say I wanted to focus on utilities. I can click on that, and it would give me that information specific to the utilities. So clicking on these different variables allows you to change the data and view it in a different way. And this is what allows you to kind of explore and get a little bit deeper around your finances. Now, if you have the alternate version of the budget model, you don't have these what are called forms where you can go around and click on these different options. Instead, you have a series of boxes in which are mostly blank except for the X in front of one of the options. So the way this works is that whatever option you choose, you need to just type an X in front of it, and then make sure that's the only X that you have listed, because the formulas will always pick the topmost X. So if you have an X on top where it says year to date, and then down below you put an X in front of March because you want to focus on that month, it'll still give you year-to-date information until you delete that top X. So hopefully that made sense, but if it didn't, please post a comment in the forum and I can answer your query there. But basically the functionality between the 2 files is the same. It's just one has this ability where you can point and click, and the other is you have to type an X and delete an X in order to get what you want. With that said, let's take a look at a couple scenarios to show how all this comes together. Okay, so in the first scenario, I'm looking at my data for the entire year, And I think the first thing that jumps out at me is January has the largest negative variance. So something happened in January where I spent a lot more than I thought I would, and I'd like to understand that better. So the first thing I want to do is I just want to look at the month of January. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that month so we can isolate that information. So now that we've clicked on January, it becomes immediately clear what the source of that variance is. If we look both at the donut chart as well as the bar graph on the lower right corner, we see that big one-time things is driving the expenses for that month. I mean, it's represented here in this light gray part of the donut or the pie graph if you're looking at the alternate version. And it's very obvious down below where you see that it's by far the largest variance for that month. So I want to understand why. What happened? So to dig a little bit deeper, I can go ahead and click big one-time things in this chart in the lower right. And now I can see what are the top expenses that were driving that category. And here it looks like I purchased a computer, replaced the upstairs toilet, had some fence repair, and bought a dishwasher. And we're not quite sure what those other charges are. But immediately I can tell, oh, probably didn't expect the toilet to need to be replaced or the fence to be repaired. So we had some big items that came about that were unexpected. And that's what caused those expenses to go up significantly, and that created the variance overall. So you can see in that example how quickly we saw a variance where we spent more money than we expected, and we were able to dig right in just a few seconds to understand what was going on. Let's use another example to kind of see how we can analyze our data. So in our second scenario, I'm just going to look back for the entire year. We know we had a lot of big one-time things in January, and there's probably some stuff we could unearth if we looked at other months. But I'm curious about miscellaneous. So miscellaneous is a category I see. It's my third largest variance. I'm curious about what's in there, and are there any opportunities to cut back expenses there? So I'm just going to go ahead and go right down to the lower right corner, and I'm going to click on miscellaneous, and I'm going to take a look at what I spent. In my top 10, my first one that pops up is this professional conference. And that's interesting because that's $550, where my overall variance was $580. So it could be that that expense wasn't budgeted. I didn't expect to have that expense, but because I did, that created the overall variance. So that's one possibility. Or maybe if I had budgeted that, it's related to something else. And as I look on the top 10, I see a lot of cat stuff. So maybe my cat expenses were more than I thought they were, and so my budget maybe isn't correct, or maybe I'm spending more than I should on cat stuff. So that's something to think about. What else do we have? Oh, a professional dart set. That might have driven the variance, but that's kind of a one-off expense, so I'm probably not too worried about that. What's this Vest of the Month club? That's curious. So maybe that's an expense that I should think about cutting back on. I'm not sure if I need to belong to a Vest of the Month club, and this is a source of variance, and it's something I might want to consider carving out. So that's just an example of how you would take these graphs, do different selections, and drill down to ask yourself questions about, are those legitimate expenses? Did we budget correctly? Are those potential areas for savings and stuff like that? This is where the results gives you the information that you need to make the decisions that will hopefully position you better from a financial perspective. And that concludes our last of the core instructional videos around the Budget Buddy tool. At this point, you know enough to be dangerous, and you're ready to get going. You may have more detailed questions than what the videos address, and in that case, you can go to budbud.info and go into the forum to post your question, and I will go in and respond to it. In addition, there are other videos I'll be posting that kind of expand on the information I've given thus far. We'll have a series of videos around some of the hidden tools within the Budget Buddy file. And we'll have a couple of videos either answering common questions or addressing other unusual budget situations that may come up that may be impacting you. But at this point, you have what you need to go forward. So with that, I wish you the best. I'm here for you if you need me. And I hope that this was a positive influence in your life. Thank you, and I'll catch you next time.